We welcome in Preston Guy, of course, covers LSU football over at tigerbait.com, on Twitter X at pguy77. Preston, we appreciate the time. Good to chat again, man. How are you?
Matt, thanks for squeezing me in. I know you operate a little differently than Hunt, but I appreciate you making time for me nonetheless.
Hey, man, absolutely. We appreciate you joining. And look, it really couldn't come at a better time, Preston. I mean, look, the transfer portal for football, the spring window is now done. We'll talk plenty about that. But the big transfer portal news is LSU's got a visitor on campus this weekend. Top available player in the portal, defensive lineman Bernard Gooden from USF. What do you make of the move so far early on in the visit?
Yeah, Bernard is visiting right now as we speak. He's supposed to be here through tomorrow. And I've been working the phones, trying to talk to some people. And look, from sources, LSU feels as good as they can possibly feel about him. The current feeling is they expect he will be an LSU Tiger. However, I want to heavily preface this with saying, know the era that we're in. I mean, this is the NIL portal era. I mean, nothing is as – I mean, we felt as confident as we could in Bryce Underwood for months.
Yeah.
And that still happened. So, of course, something could happen, and anybody can roll up and overpay if they sound desperate enough. I'll also tell you that in talking with people, LSU looked at this portal, and this was the one man they were interested in. This was the guy. I mean, this was not a particularly impressive portal, and Bernard Gooden is a piece. They looked at this defensive line spot, which I'm presuming they're recruiting him as a full-time defensive tackle. Of course, he's been a defensive lineman for USF and rotated spots, but they're obviously looking at him as a true defensive tackle. They thought this was one of the handful of positions of need that they still had in this portal window, and they're not just taking anybody, and they're not overpaying for somebody who's not very good. So, you know, they feel very good about him. They like him a lot. They think they can give them some much-needed depth and at a position like defensive tackle where they're okay at. They're certainly better than they were a year ago, but they still could use a little bit of help there.
The defensive tackle is a really interesting position for them because, as you said, I mean, they're already pretty good on depth. I mean, nine scholarship defensive tackles, but experience, right, is kind of where they've lacked. Do you think Gooden adds enough of that? I mean, 3 years in college, but correct me if I'm wrong, 1 year starting. Would he add enough experience to LSU?
Yeah, and this will be his third school, by the way. A lot of people don't know. He actually played for Wake Forest before coming to USF. But, you know, he had 35 tackles, 10 for a loss, so he was a presence last year. You know, ultimately, you want as many guys as possible that give you a chance to give that starting quality rep, because eventually someone has to be a starter. You can't have everybody just be a depth piece and rotate a bunch of guys in and hope that if they give their 100%, they're good enough. You need someone who's actually good eventually. But, you know, he'll be a candidate to compete for that starting role, and he's got some guys to fend off. I would say your three front runners probably right now are Jacobian Guillory, Ahmad Bro, and McKinley for your starting defensive tackle right now. And he'll probably come in and have to outwork those guys to earn reps over them. I would say fourth is his highest, I would project day one for him. But he's certainly a guy, if he were to come in and be a starter, you could see why. You see the film and tape and what he's capable of doing. You're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense why he turned out to be a good starter, if that is indeed what happened.
You mentioned, the portal era and the NIL era, and anybody can really come in and swipe somebody right out from underneath you. Best you can tell, who are the other teams that LSU is competing with for Bernard Gooden, excuse me?
Yeah, I really don't have anybody on my radar because this has happened so quickly for him. I know LSU swooped in and was the first team to woo him and bring him in, but I'm not tracking. I don't have any other visits that he's planned. Of course, he's going to leave LSU this weekend, and he'll probably figure up a backup option if there is one. But my expectation, what I believe, based on what I'm talking with people, I think this will get handled. This will be done pretty quickly. But obviously, let me heavy preface again.
For sure.
Anything can happen. It's a crazy era.
Yeah, it's wild. It's insane, and it's just completely unpredictable. Okay, so 10-day portal window for spring comes to an end. LSU sees two departures. Brian Kelly talked a lot about his confidence in this team, and they like where the roster is at. Were you surprised, though, that maybe a few more guys from LSU didn't enter the portal?
Well, and that was one of the things that I've been poking around with LSU a lot is, in talking about their portal efforts, how much of that goes into retention? And the answer is a lot. In fact, I would say more so than bringing guys in. They really wanted to focus on educating their guys that the grass is not always greener on the other side. And you don't want to just leave for a lateral move. Continuity is much better to stick with the same coaching staff and team. And, sometimes guys come up and they're like, look, so-and-so made X money, and, I know I can make more. And sometimes they have to, make sure they're doing right by their guys. So, look, to only lose, and look, I put lose in quotation marks here because whether you choose to count these guys as losses or not is up to you. Javen Nicholas and John Emery during this window, that's phenomenal. And in fact, this whole portal cycle, there's maybe been 2 or 3 guys that they lost that they were actually really upset about, and that's a bit of a stretch. I would say in terms of net talent gain for LSU in these portal windows, I mean, this has been Brian Kelly's best year in terms of how much talent he retained and how much he brings in through the portal.
And, Preston, you bring up an interesting point with a guy like John Emery because, I mean, you obviously count him, but I mean, Brian Kelly had said before the portal window even opened that, LSU was set. I think his quote was, "We're set at the running back position." So, I mean, that one was expected. So, I mean, really you could look at it and go, well, actually it was kind of only Javen Nicholas, which is, it's fascinating because of the era that we are in and that it is so unpredictable. Like, oh, you feel great about the, the roster and you like where it's at, but, some guys make decisions that you're not always expecting. So, for them to come out of it unscathed, I think is really promising. Not only that, but and you tell me if you disagree, but for the buy-in that this team has with what the staff is selling.
And look, buy-in given how the fans are kind of grumbling and upset with how year 3 went under Brian Kelly, to see that kind of buy-in from the players, it really speaks volumes. And I guess it starts with fans decided to buy into the program when, the NIL investments came in this year. You have to buy in. If you don't buy in, your team is going to fall apart in this era. So it's certainly a positive scene to show that this season that fell way short of expectations hasn't really dismantled your ability to proceed in the future. There's still a lot of faith and trust in what Brian Kelly and this staff is doing.
That's a great point as well. Okay, before we move on from the portal, one more. We talked about Gooden, obviously, at the defensive tackle spot. Is there another spot on this LSU team that you could envision them maybe taking a peek at somebody in the spring portal?
I would really like them to bring in a safety. However, in talking with people, there's not a safety in this portal they're interested in. And now it's still open for another 11 hours and about 34 minutes it'll be open. So we'll see if they choose to bring someone in, if someone at the last second enters in and he's a stud. But also keep in mind they can't be within the conference. It has to be outside of the SEC. So that's one of the reasons why this portal is more mild. But I don't expect them to take anybody else at all other than Gooden at this point, based on what I've heard. But, man, I sure do wish that a Jamal Adams would come out of this portal. It'd be nice. I believe at this point, Musso, they're going to have to push a corner to safety to get what you need out of that safety spot.
Any candidate that you're thinking of in particular?
Oh, I got a few names that I think look.
Let's hear them.
We'll look at Mansour Delane's tape.
Yeah.
I mean, he's played a little bit of safety, but he's been primarily a corner. But that guy can tackle, and he has some real just good tackling film. I think he could play safety, and the coverage skills. I mean, if you could play corner, for the most part, you got the coverage skills to play safety. It's whether or not you can go in the box and be physical is what corner's converting over. I could see Jakeem Jackson being a guy as well, being able to pull that off. I mean, there's definitely a lot of versatile players that they pulled in this year. So I think if you don't pull in a safety, I would like to see at least one of those guys slide over.
We're chatting with Preston Guy, of course, covers LSU football and recruiting for TigerBait.com. You can follow him on Twitter, X, at PGuy77, if you don't already. Preston, a couple more for you, and your time very much appreciated. From the portal and the current team to the high school recruiting ranks, LSU is chasing after quarterback Bo Bentley hard. And, I mean, look, they're in the top 3. They have an official visit scheduled with him in June. I believe it's his last official. Kind of update us, if you can, where LSU stands in that recruitment for a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah, the teams are definitely pushing hard from him, but the scuttlebutt I'm getting is that he's not necessarily in as big of a rush to do anything right now. Like, these visits are in June, and, so you've got we're in April right now.
Yeah.
So you've got at least a month before things heat up. LSU will be the last visit, which means he will be visiting Oklahoma and Georgia first. And I from what I'm hearing, he really wants to see how a lot of this litigation goes down with NIL stuff this summer before he makes a true decision, because that's going to change how money gets distributed. There's a lot of balls up in the air, and I don't want to bore anybody with NIL litigation, because I bet not very many people listening have the legal experience to keep up with that. But essentially, it could be a much more highly regulated situation in 12 months from now. And, revenue sharing is going to play a role. What collectives are capable of doing after this summer is going to change. So a lot of, what he's talking with teams and things like that, it might be flipped upside down on its head and be completely changed this summer. So I think he's going to wait a little bit, probably toward the back end of summer, as more of that stuff gets settled before he has to make his decision. Of course, signing day is until December. So I wouldn't expect it to particularly heat up too quickly here in the next 45 days, but certainly he is on LSU shortlist. LSU doesn't have a ton of guys for 2026 they're looking at, and you need a new quarterback for next year. One thing that stands out to me is it's going to be up for grabs who LSU's starting quarterback is next year. Michael Van Buren and Colin Hurley, neither one of them have a stranglehold on that spot. So a young guy will have the opportunity. I'm not saying it's likely, but he'll have the opportunity. It stands out. But, hey, y'all watch out for this 2027 quarterback class LSU has. They have at least 3 studs they're high in on.
Yeah, one of them plays right down the road. Last thing for you, Preston, and again, your time appreciated. I'd love a thought on Will Campbell going 4th overall last night to the New England Patriots. I mean, you covered him his entire time at LSU, just kind of the crescendo for the ending of his career going 4th overall.
Man, it's just so bad. He has such tiny arms. Looks like Deadpool out there when they cut his arms off.
It really cost him, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just what a shame. No, good for Will. I'm gonna tell you this: his quote after he got drafted about "I'm gonna, what is it? I'll die to to protect my quarterback." Man, good for him, man. I love the situation he's getting drafted into, where they're high on Drake May. They've got a no-nonsense coach, Mike Vrabel. Love that situation for Will. Interestingly enough, only the second LSU Tiger drafted in the modern era from the offensive line in the first round. Only him and Alan Faneca. That caught me off guard. I guess, look, we saw how the rap during the Les Miles era was we didn't have linemen recruited, and you got to fortify the trenches, and that's what they brought Brian Kelly here to help out with. But just a little surprising to see that he's the first one to do it since Alan Faneca. It really caught me off guard with that, but good for him getting out there. You always want a little bit of the spotlight in the first round for a program, and to get a top 5 guy, that's really good. I believe that 6 out of the last 7 drafts, LSU having a top 5 player drafted. I think it's the most in the country, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have it in front of me, but that's what LSU's been able to do in the top 5 with Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels and Jamar Chase and Derek Stingley Jr. and now Will Campbell. It's truly impressive stuff, the amount of top-end talent LSU's been able to produce in the last 7 years.
Yeah, you said a little bit of the spotlight. That's a lot of the spotlight. That many years in a row. That's kind of hogging the spotlight a little bit there, Preston. Glad they're doing that. That's absolutely fantastic to take to the recruiting trail. Preston, we appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you, and we'll have to do it again soon.
All right, Matt. See you soon, man.
Later.
Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.